Look at the clock on the nightstand. It is precisely 4:41 a.m. The house is completely dark, and the ambient temperature in your bedroom has dropped to its lowest point. On the surface, under the heavy blankets, you appear perfectly still, locked in the deep, restorative phases of sleep. But underneath the skin, a violent, purely mechanical catastrophe is tearing through the microscopic geography of your vascular system. Your circulatory network is currently acting as a high-pressure crime scene. The blood pumping out of the left ventricle of your heart right at this very millisecond does not resemble the fluid, bright crimson liquid you visualize. It is thick. It is highly viscous. It is moving with the heavy, reluctant, dragging momentum of wet sludge. This is the physiological reality of the death hour. This is the exact biological window when the highest statistical spike of fatal myocardial infarctions and ischemic strokes occurs globally. It is not bad luck. It is not a sudden, random malfunction of the cardiac muscle. It is a mathematical certainty, born from a deliberate, seemingly innocent physiological drought you initiated exactly 6 hours ago. We have to rewind the tape back to 10 p.m. to understand the weapon you used against your own body. You stood in the bathroom, brushed your teeth, and prepared for bed. You looked at the glass of water sitting on the counter, and you made a conscious, calculated choice to walk past it. The reasoning felt entirely logical. You wanted to avoid the frustrating inconvenience of waking up at 2 a.m. to empty your bladder. You traded a fundamental biological solvent for the guarantee of uninterrupted sleep. It seems like a harmless lifestyle adjustment, a practical decision millions of people make every single night. But let us look at what actually happens at the cellular level when you enforce this artificial drought. By denying your body that final, crucial intake of water before entering an 8-hour fasting period, you essentially reached in and shut off the main valve to your plasma volume. While you sleep, your body does not stop consuming moisture. It continues to hemorrhage water at an alarming rate. You exhale dense water vapor with every single breath. Your skin constantly loses moisture through microperspiration to regulate your core temperature. Your kidneys are still filtering out toxins, requiring fluid to create urine. By the time the clock strikes 1 a.m., the blood viscosity inside your veins reaches a critical red line. The absolute number of red blood cells, the erythrocytes carrying oxygen, remains exactly the same. But the vital fluid they travel in, the plasma, has severely evaporated. Imagine a rushing river suddenly drying up, leaving behind a thick mud filled with sharp rocks. That is what your bloodstream looks like right now. Because of this extreme fluid loss, the endothelial lining begins to suffer. This lining is the incredibly delicate, Teflon-like inner wall of your blood vessels. When properly hydrated, it is flawlessly smooth, allowing cells to glide past at high speeds without friction. But under the stress of nighttime dehydration, this biological lubrication vanishes. The once slick surface of the endothelium becomes coarse, inflamed, irritated, and highly sensitive to mechanical friction. Now we reach the 2 a.m. marker. The flow of blood through your major arteries is incredibly sluggish. Cellular debris, heavy triglycerides, rogue platelets, and exhausted red blood cells are cramped together in the shrinking volume of plasma. They start bumping into each other. More importantly, they begin to scrape aggressively against the rough, dehydrated patches of your endothelial wall. This physical friction is not ignored by the body. It triggers an immediate, localized emergency alarm within the bloodstream. Your biological defense mechanisms cannot distinguish between internal dehydration friction and an external bleeding wound. The body assumes there is a critical vascular injury that needs to be patched immediately. In a fraction of a second, the system activates a specific protein circulating in your blood called fibrinogen. Instantly, fibrinogen undergoes a rapid chemical transformation, altering its structure into insoluble fibrin threads. If you were to look at this under an electron microscope, it looks exactly like a dense, sticky spider web being aggressively spun directly across the width of your artery. This biological net is indiscriminate. It catches everything. It violently traps the passing red blood cells, pulling in floating platelets and cementing them together with cholesterol plaques. It creates a massive, tangled clump of cellular wreckage. A mechanical knot, a thrombus. This is the physical birth of a blood clot. It is forming completely silently in the dark, steadily tightening its suffocating grip within the narrowest corridors of your microvessels. The cell's tissue located downstream, waiting desperately for oxygen beyond this knot, begin to choke. They send out panic signals, manifesting as that strange, dull ache in your shoulder or the faint, tingling numbness creeping into your left fingertips while you dream. It is now 3 a.m. The ambient temperature in the room has dropped further. Your core body temperature mirrors this decline, slowing your metabolic rate to its absolute baseline. This is supposed to be the deepest phase of physical restoration. Yet inside the coronary arteries, the vital pipelines supplying your heart muscle, a mechanical crisis is rapidly escalating. The fibrin knot we observed forming an hour ago is no longer just a loose collection of trapped cells. It has calcified into a rigid, stubborn barricade. Think of it like a jagged piece of hardened concrete forming inside a narrow, flexible garden hose. The thick, viscous blood flowing behind this barricade begins to pool, creating a highly dangerous pocket of localized static pressure. Your heart, the central pump of this entire operation, is entirely unaware of the specific blockage forming in the dark. It only senses a systemic drop in overall circulation. To compensate for the sluggish flow, the autonomic nervous system sends a primitive, aggressive command: pump harder. The muscular walls of the left ventricle begin to contract violently. The hydraulic force slamming against the hardened fibrin clot multiplies with every single heartbeat. If you could place a microscopic stethoscope against the endothelial wall right now, you wouldn't hear the smooth, rhythmic flow of liquid. You would hear the harsh, turbulent grinding of dense biological sludge violently colliding with a solid obstruction. The friction is intense. The delicate endothelial cells located directly underneath the clot are being starved of oxygen and physically crushed by the pressure. They begin to undergo necrosis, cellular death. At 3:45 a.m., your circadian rhythm begins its pre-dawn awakening sequence. This is the match that lights the powder keg. Your adrenal glands, sitting quietly on top of your kidneys, receive a chemical signal to release a concentrated burst of cortisol and adrenaline into the bloodstream. The biological purpose of this chemical cocktail is to prepare your body to wake up, to actively raise your blood pressure, and to transition you out of the sleep cycle. But right now, in the presence of severe systemic dehydration and a mechanical vascular blockage, this standard operating procedure becomes a death sentence. Cortisol and adrenaline are potent vasoconstrictors. The precise moment they hit the smooth muscle tissue lining your arteries, they force those vessels to violently clamp down and narrow. Imagine taking that garden hose with the concrete blockage inside, and now you aggressively squeeze the rubber hose tightly around the concrete. The microscopic space for the blood to flow, already critically compromised, practically vanishes. This is the exact moment the death hour claims its statistics. The hydraulic pressure behind the fibrin knot reaches a critical, unsustainable threshold. The structural integrity of the clot cannot withstand the immense force of the heartbeat combined with the violent shrinking of the vessel wall. The clot fractures. It does not dissolve smoothly. It physically snaps under the crushing pressure. A large, jagged fragment of the thrombus breaks away from the main mass. It is now completely untethered, rocketing through your circulatory system like an unguided physiological missile. It travels rapidly away from the wider arteries and is pushed violently into the microscopic, highly intricate capillary networks. It has two primary destinations, and both represent catastrophic mechanical failures. If the clot travels upward, following the curve of the carotid artery, it shoots directly into the cerebral cortex. It will wedge itself into a delicate microvessel in your brain, instantly cutting off oxygen to millions of neurons. Within seconds, those neurons begin to suffocate and die. This is an ischemic stroke. If the clot travels downward or originates near the heart itself, it is forced directly into one of the smaller coronary arteries. These arteries are the exclusive supply lines feeding the heart muscle itself. The clot wedges tightly into the narrowing passage. The blood flow stops immediately. The section of the heart muscle relying on that specific artery is suddenly completely starved of oxygen. The muscle tissue begins to spasm aggressively. It screams out in a localized chemical panic. This is not a subtle discomfort. This is the crushing, suffocating sensation of an anvil being dropped squarely on the center of your chest. The pain radiates sharply down your left arm, tracking the exact path of the dying nerve endings. A cold, clammy sweat breaks out across your forehead as your sympathetic nervous system completely short-circuits in absolute terror. This is a massive myocardial infarction, a fatal heart attack. It is happening exactly at 4:11 a.m. in the absolute silence of your bedroom. And the most terrifying, sobering fact of this entire biological sequence, it was not caused by a sudden, mysterious failure of your genetics. It was not caused by an unavoidable disease you caught yesterday. It was caused by a simple failure of fluid mechanics. It was the direct, undeniable consequence of allowing your plasma volume to drop so drastically that your blood turned into an abrasive sludge, triggering a cascade of defensive clotting mechanisms that ultimately destroyed the pump itself. You initiated a mechanical failure simply because you did not want to wake up to use the bathroom. The modern medical instinct is to immediately look for a pharmacological shield. You might be visualizing blood thinners, daily aspirin regimens, or highly engineered synthetic supplements designed to force the vessels open. While acute clinical interventions have their absolute place in emergency trauma, relying on them to counteract a daily, self-inflicted mechanical drought is biologically illogical. You are essentially attempting to use chemical explosives to clear a massive traffic jam that was caused purely by a lack of oil. The ultimate biological scalpel required to dismantle this exact sequence of mechanical failure does not come inside an amber pill bottle. It is frighteningly simple. It requires zero medical prescription. It relies purely on the foundational, unbreakable laws of fluid dynamics. We are talking about exactly 200 milliliters of water, but the physical state of this liquid is paramount. The precise thermal temperature of the water is the defining difference between triggering a metabolic shock and executing a flawless vascular rescue operation. Let us analyze the internal physics of a glass of cold water first. If you pull a bottle from the refrigerator, sitting at perhaps 4 degrees Celsius, and drink it at 10 o'clock at night, you are dropping a thermal bomb directly into your core. The vagus nerve, the massive, highly sensitive information highway, running directly from your gut to your brainstem, instantly detects this severe temperature drop. It panics. It interprets the sudden cold as a profound physiological stressor. In an immediate defensive response, the vagus nerve actively constricts the blood vessels surrounding your stomach to preserve your core body heat. It aggressively halts the digestive process and significantly delays gastric emptying. The freezing water simply sits in your stomach. It pools there, trapped, waiting to be slowly heated by your internal body temperature before the pyloric valve will finally allow it into the intestines for absorption. By the time this cold water is finally processed and reaches your systemic bloodstream, the midnight vascular drought has already firmly taken hold. You have failed to alter the plasma volume in time. Now we change one single physical parameter. Heat that exact same 200 milliliters of water to precisely 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. This temperature hovers just slightly above your normal core body heat. When this warm liquid makes contact with your gastric lining, the biological response is entirely different. The vagus nerve remains completely calm. The pyloric sphincter, the heavy muscular valve located at the bottom of your stomach, immediately relaxes and opens wide. Because the temperature of the water perfectly mimics your internal environment, your body does not need to expend a single ounce of metabolic energy to heat it. The water bypasses standard gastric holding protocols entirely. It flushes directly into the upper intestine and is absorbed rapidly through the intestinal wall, moving straight into the mesenteric veins. Within less than 15 minutes of swallowing, this precise volume of water physically enters your systemic circulation. Watch what happens to the blood physics inside your vessels now. As this new fluid merges with your bloodstream, the plasma volume instantly and drastically expands. The extreme, dangerous density of the red blood cells drops off immediately. The blood viscosity, the thick, dragging mud-like quality, is forcibly diluted. Remember the agonizing friction we observed earlier at 2 in the morning? The exhausted red blood cells aggressively scraping against the dehydrated, inflamed endothelial wall. That specific physical friction is instantly neutralized. The warm water acts as a rapid-release biological lubricant. It coats the rough patches of the vascular lining. Because the fluid flow remains rapid, smooth, and entirely unobstructed, the biological alarm bells never ring. The fibrinogen proteins circulating aimlessly in the plasma are never triggered by friction to change their chemical shape. They never transform. They never spin their deadly fibrin webs across the artery. The biological net is simply never cast. You are actively, physically dissolving the architectural foundation of the thrombus before a single rogue platelet even has the opportunity to attach to it. You are intervening at the most fundamental, microscopic level of the pathology. Furthermore, the slight thermal increase radiating from the warm water triggers a very mild systemic vasodilation. Instead of the cortisol-induced clamping and shrinking we see during the 4 a.m. death hour, the warm water gently encourages the smooth muscle tissue surrounding your peripheral arteries to relax. The inner diameter of the vessels slightly expands. This singular action immediately lowers the peripheral vascular resistance. Your central pump, the heart, does not have to violently increase its contraction force to push blood to your extremities. It beats with a steady, effortless rhythm, pushing a perfectly diluted, highly oxygenated fluid through wide, perfectly lubricated channels. This is the harsh, unyielding reality of preventative physiology. It is not about violently fighting a disease after it has already manifested and caused tissue death. It is about fundamentally altering the physical environment inside your veins so the mechanical gears of the disease simply cannot operate. Exactly 200 milliliters. It is roughly the exact volume of a standard, small teacup. You consume it exactly at 10 o'clock at night or precisely 30 minutes before you intend to close your eyes and enter the sleep cycle. Why this highly specific volume? Because the human anatomy is a delicate balancing act. Anything significantly more than 200 milliliters will rapidly overfill the bladder, stretching the detrusor muscle beyond its resting capacity and inevitably triggering the precise nighttime awakening you were originally trying to avoid. 200 milliliters is the exact physiological sweet spot. It provides just enough chemical solvent to sustain the plasma volume through the entire 8-hour fasting window, without generating the excess urine that demands immediate physical expulsion. Consider the stark contrast of the alternative. You wake up in the middle of the night, feeling a faint, undeniable thirst. Your lips are dry. You look at the dark hallway leading to the kitchen, and you make the calculated decision to ignore the biological signal. You close your eyes, betting that your endothelial walls can withstand the aggressive friction of highly dehydrated blood cells for just another 3 or 4 hours. Statistically, for hundreds of thousands of individuals globally, that exact bet is lost precisely at the 4 a.m. mark. The modern medical industry has successfully conditioned us to believe that catastrophic physical events require equally catastrophic, complex, and highly expensive interventions. We subconsciously expect a life-saving protocol to come sealed in a sterile foil package, administered by a specialist in a white coat. But human physiology does not care about your medical insurance or your supplement budget. It operates strictly on foundational physics. If you remove the liquid solvent from a closed pressurized system, the sludge will eventually clog the pipes. If you proactively restore that solvent, the system flows effortlessly. It is an undeniable mathematical reality. The human cardiovascular system is arguably the most resilient, tireless engine ever designed in the known universe. It will forcefully beat roughly 100,000 times in a single 24-hour cycle. It does not ask for vacations. It does not ask for rest. It only asks for the basic raw materials required to execute its mechanical function safely. It asks for plasma. It asks for water. By implementing this single, highly specific nightly protocol, exactly 200 milliliters of warm water, heated to precisely 40 to 45 degrees Celsius, and consumed exactly 30 minutes before your sleep cycle, you are giving your heart the ultimate biological advantage. You are preemptively dissolving the catastrophic threat of the fibrin web. You are ensuring that when your circadian clock inevitably triggers that dawn surge of cortisol and adrenaline, your microvessels are perfectly lubricated, properly dilated, and fully prepared to handle the hydraulic pressure. When the 4 a.m. death hour strikes, instead of a violent, desperate struggle against a hardened blood clot. Your central pump pushes thin, highly oxygenated blood smoothly through wide-open, completely frictionless channels. You wake up feeling genuinely restored, rather than physically exhausted from a night-long internal war. Do not wait for the terrifying tingling sensation in your left arm to serve as your final warning. By the exact moment that crushing pain radiates into your shoulder, the mechanical failure has already occurred. The thrombus is already firmly lodged. The cardiac tissue is already actively suffocating. Preventative medicine is never about reacting to the pain. It is about fundamentally respecting the physical laws of your body long before the emergency alarm ever rings. Tonight, when you turn off the bedroom lights, look at the nightstand. Place a small teacup there. Fill it with warm water. Drink it deliberately. It takes less than 30 seconds of your time. But those 30 seconds will fundamentally alter the viscosity of your blood for the entire night. You are not just drinking a beverage. You are actively performing a microscopic, systemic, vascular rescue operation. Your biology is incredibly clear. The fluid mechanics are proven. The decision, as always, is entirely yours. If this specific breakdown of your cardiovascular physics has fundamentally changed how you view your nighttime routine, you must take action. Subscribe to this channel right now. We do not deal in generic, feel-good health advice. We dissect the harsh biological truths that dictate your daily survival. Leave a comment below with the exact time you plan to drink your 200 milliliters tonight. We will see you in the next vascular breakdown.